Welcome to Moving Through and Beyond, a podcast dedicated to sharing inspired journeys of redefining life, vision, and purpose after immense hardship and grief. My goal with this podcast is to give you hope and to let my guest journeys inspire you to make the choice to keep looking up. I'm your host, Carey Conley. Hi, everyone. This is Carey Conley. Thank you for listening to this very special episode I have today for you with my good friend, Michelle Jewsbury. Michelle, thank you so much, my little traveling speaker friend, for being here.
Yeah, of course. I'm super excited about being here, Carey. It's been, 3 or 4 weeks since we've seen each other in person, and hopefully that'll happen again very, very soon.
I hope so, too. So I just want to read you all a little bit about Michelle's bio and her background, and then I'm just going to have her share her story because she's doing some really, really awesome things in this world. So Michelle is a powerhouse advocate for those who have experienced pain and trauma. As the CEO and founder of Unsilenced Voices, a nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering survivors of domestic violence and abuse, Michelle has become a leading voice in the fight against these insidious crimes. Michelle's journey has been shaped by her own experience of trauma and abuse, which I know she will share with us today. And through her work with Unsilenced Voices, Michelle has empowered survivors of abuse and domestic violence to break the cycle of violence and reclaim their power. By providing resources, education, and support, Michelle and her team have helped survivors to heal and find their voice in a world that often silences them. And now she's, roaming the world. She's an international speaker, coach, all the things to just get her message heard. And I'm just thrilled that you could take the time to come on here, Michelle, and we can talk a little bit more about what you're doing. And that I got you to sit still for about 5 minutes instead of traveling all over the world.
No, all good. I'm super excited about being here, Connolly, Miss Connolly, Carey.
I love that.
Carey, you and I met, I want to say through Angel Tussey a couple of years back. And I know those of you listening on this Evergreen podcast, you're like a couple years back. So I think that we met in 2019 or 2020, right around the pandemic time. And you have just always been a bright soul and somebody who I've always wanted to connect with. And I'm super excited about being here and honored to share stages with you and speak with you and so that we can impact so many other people. So great introduction. Thank you for that. But a little bit about me, like Carey said, I was born in North Idaho, moved around my whole life. My daddy was military, and growing up, I learned to make friends and then learned to unmake friends and have to remake friends because we moved to cities and states very frequently. So I moved schools often. But when I was about, 16 years old, I fell in love with acting and decided that when I graduated high school, I was going to move to Hollywood, California and be a movie star. And that's what I did. I moved to Hollywood and loved it, right? Things were going well. I loved the idea of the glitz and the glamour, and I was starring in independent plays and films, and then I ended up meeting somebody who swept me off my feet, this blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy, and I thought he was my Prince Charming. And I don't know if you're out there listening. If you think that you have a Prince Charming, but you see red flags, listen to your intuition, because I did not. And I ended up staying with him for over 4 years, and during that 4 years, I suffered all forms of domestic violence. But upon escaping that relationship, I ended up writing and performing my story in a 65-minute solo play. And I debuted that in 2016. And then people started coming up to me and telling me their stories of survival, not just domestic violence, but sexual abuse and human trafficking, other ailments, suicide attempts, you name it. And I realized that God was telling me to do something more. And in 2017, I founded Unsilenced Voices, which began in West Africa. So we began in Ghana, expanding to Sierra Leone, expanding to Rwanda. And in 2022, we gifted over $33,000 to USA survivors. 2019, I began speaking all over the world, traveling. I remember being stuck in Egypt at the Women's Economic Forum, speaking when the world shut down in March of 2020. And since then, I share stages with a multitude of amazing speakers, including Carey Connolly here, and get to coach and teach people how to use their stories to create missions, ministries, movements, nonprofits, and businesses, and really why it's important to speak up. We have book anthologies and speaking events and different types of courses. So Super honored to be here, Carey. I'm sure you have questions, and thank you so much.
So many things. Yes. I wanted to be an actress as well. I grew up. I don't know if I've ever told you that.
No.
So good for you for running off to Hollywood. Yeah, I grew up wanting to sing and act and dance and do all the things. My parents thought that was super cute, and they came and watched me in all the little school variety shows and stuff, But the message was really clear that I needed to get a degree, go to college, get a degree, get the job, and do all the right things, right? So good for you for running off and following your dream. Yeah, I did not know that about you. That's interesting. So,
Oh, I'm surprised.
And so young. Yeah, yeah. So when you met this gentleman, you said a couple of things that I want to go back to because I think it's important for people who are listening that might be resonating with what you're sharing around the situation you were in, because I know that's your heart and you want to really help those people. So tell me, first of all, when you said there were red flags that you ignored, what were the red flags?
So originally, I thought that it was kind of sweet that he would always order for me, that he always said that I didn't need to bring credit cards or anything with me, that he would carry my ID. He didn't like me carrying a purse. I thought it was lovely, oh, he wants to take care of me, but really it was controlling. I started to notice how he spoke to servers, how he spoke to bartenders, people that helped us, even the valet people. He was extremely cocky. And I'm not saying cocky is a red flag, but I'm saying that the habitual cockiness from him, where he was better than everybody else and actually said that on multiple occasions, it was a huge red flag. And then, we have these things called cell phones, ladies and gentlemen, right? And I never Googled him. So if I would have seen that he had prior things on his record, that if I spoke to his family or his friends, they all warned me ahead of time, you don't want to date him, you don't want to date him, but nobody told me exactly why. When I finally moved in with him, after hearing God say no very loudly in my head, things just started escalating. It was emotional manipulation. It was just controlling, and he would tell me things and uplift me, and he would gaslight me multiple times, tell me that the way I remember situations is not accurate. And he made me second guess myself. So he kind of dwindled my self-confidence down to a point where I was fully reliant on him. I mean, I was already financially because he made me quit my job. I was already because he made me get rid of my vehicle so he could, quote unquote, buy me another car. So he really was controlling my life. And then the abuse started. The actual physical and sexual abuse started. Yeah.
Wow. So, I have not had this kind of trauma in my life, Michelle. I think it's so interesting how you're sharing. It was just one thing leading to another thing, leading to another thing, and not being aware that you're going down this slippery slope. But I think it's also, I think women have such a real strong intuition. And I just don't think that enough of us listen to it. Right?
That is very true. I didn't listen to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't listen to it at all.
Yeah. It's taken me, I'm 61 years old. It's taken me until the latter half of my life to really, really pay attention to what my gut is telling me about people, about decisions with my career or where I'm living, and all the things. And I think that's a huge message that we need to get out to people, especially really young women in this world right now, because there's so much coming at them so fast. To really learn how to really trust their intuition.
Yeah, I remember I was actually with a girlfriend of mine, and I was coming out of a Bible study. So we were walking across the street to go get something to eat or something to drink. I don't remember exactly what we were doing, but I remember crossing across the street and talking to her about Paul. So we'll call my abuser Paul, and talking to her about how excited I was and telling her about some of the situations that happened. And she kind of looked at me and questioned. And that is the time that I actually heard the distinct no from God, like this intuition, whatever you want to call it, this is not a good situation. No, 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 stay out, stay out. And, I've always been in love with love. And I don't want to call myself a hopeless romantic because I'm a romantic, right? Because it's not hopeless being a romantic. And I really thought that he was going to be that guy for me. And he showed me a whole nother world. I still care for the man, but I definitely don't ever want to see him again. I don't want to ever be in a relationship with him. When I say care, I actually feel bad for him. Hurt people hurt people. And I know a lot of what he went through came out in physical and emotional aggression towards the closest people in his life. And I was that closest person. So my prayer is that he's actually seeking help. And we don't listen to that intuition, ladies. And it's not just women that get abused. It's just women that speak up more frequently. And it's women that get hurt more often because males are just a lot more physically fit, physically stronger than we are. So, it is listening to that, despite the wants and the dreams and the ideologies. When you close your eyes and you can see yourself, in this boat and this captain coming to save you, or whatever your fairy tale romance is, knowing that that's not reality.
Right. So when you started realizing all this was happening, Michelle, what did you start doing to remove yourself from this situation?
So it's very unsafe for people to leave an abusive situation and tell their abuser. So I didn't know this, of course, because I was not talking to anybody about what I was going through. However, I knew that I needed to get out. After the first beating, and then it happened again, I have to work out a plan. So he had isolated me away from my friends, away from my congregation. He had taken away my employment. He had taken away my credit cards and financial opportunities and my money, my life. And he really kind of made me reliant on him. So what I started to do was he was a very successful man. So in the mornings I would kind of clean up, and he always had cash in his pockets, in his jeans. So I used to actually take that cash and stash it. So when and if I got to the point where I wanted and needed to escape, I had an opportunity to leave with something in hand instead of being flat broke. I also double paid my car payments every month. So he paid from a business account, and I double paid it because I knew one day I was going to need to leave. So when I actually left, I took the vehicle with me because he actually co-signed on the vehicle. So it was in both of our names, but it was my primary vehicle. So when I took it, it was actually paid for another year because at that point I could not afford, it was a Lexus. I could not afford this fancy car or the car payments. So I was able to do that. And I started speaking to a therapist. So being able to express yourself is super important. In order to heal, you have to feel. So I started speaking to this therapist. She started to encourage me. I started speaking to another therapist, and I just started to realize what was happening. So then I started to incrementally plan my escape. So.
Wow. I think this is so important, again, because I've never been in this situation. And I've always wondered, how do women get out of a situation like this? Because I do realize that it is very dangerous. Mm-hmm. And a lot of women don't leave, Michelle, right?
I know.
I mean, there's a huge percentage that stay. Yeah. Why do you think that is? What do you think are the factors that determine somebody that makes the decision, I'm out, I'm making a plan, or there's no way out, I'm staying in?
So there's a cycle in domestic violence. It goes from walking on eggshells to a big blow up to the apology stage. So there was one incident, October of 2012, where I was black and blue. I mean, I was beaten to a pulp pretty much. And the next morning, he and I woke up. I drifted in and out of sleep that night. And when I woke up, he was staring at me crying and apologizing for what he did. I'm so sorry, Michelle. I love you so much. I don't know what I did. I don't know what happened. I promise I won't ever do this again. Please forgive me. And at that point, I was actually extremely physically weak and emotionally weak from all of the battering that, I forgave him. And I stayed. I mean, that specific beating, he ended up having to cover the mirrors in the house because I took a baseball bat to one of the mirrors because my eye was covered. I mean, it was black, and I didn't want to see this because I'm a strong, independent woman. Carey, you've met me, right? I don't take SHIT
It's hard
from
for me
anybody.
to picture you like this, Michelle.
Yeah, I know. And it's really hard for a lot of people to picture me like this. But it's really important to remember that domestic violence doesn't choose between race, between socioeconomic backgrounds, between states or countries. Domestic violence can happen to anyone, whether you are rich or whether you are poor. And it happened to me. And I didn't grow up in abuse. My mom and dad never yelled at each other, let alone raise their hands to one another. So that wasn't something in my life. So people need to realize this. And women in particularly are in grave danger when they stay in these abusive situations. And the reason why most people stay is because of that apology stage. The I love you, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. The problem is it happens again and again and again. It's a habitual cycle that doesn't stop. There has to be some drastic measure that happens in order for that cycle to stop. So it's definitely a catch-22. It's a very scary situation, and it is, Carey, happening way too often in society. And many people don't realize that it's right here in our own backyard. Statistically speaking, 1 in 4 women in the U.S., 1 in 7 men in the U.S., 1 in 3 women worldwide experience domestic violence. And that doesn't account for the sexual abuse, the child abuse, the $300 billion a year industry for human trafficking. So there's a lot of trauma that happens, and then it turns into generational trauma. I just went off on a tangent there because I'm very passionate about this.
Well, and again, this is a subject that I've learned mostly from you, and learning so much right now. And I just think it's so important because it is one of those things that women suffer in silence over, and we don't see it. Like there's probably, in all the friends that I have in the associations, I'm sure it's happening to some of these women, and I don't know it. And it's kind of sad to think about that it's such a big percentage. 1 in 4 is a huge statistic. So how long did it take you to execute your plan?
So I ended up staying with him, physically with him, for roughly 3.5, 4 years. And then when I finally escaped, I began contacting attorneys. So a lot of people, you are sad, you're lonely, you're depressed. We want to make the relationship work even though we've left. However, I started to understand that he was trapping me financially. So initially, when I went to an attorney to talk to them about my financial situation, Paul had put a lot of things under my name, credit cards, maxed everything out, the cars, you name it. So he demolished my credit. And I was so fearful at the time that he was going to do that. So I contacted attorneys specifically for common law marriage, for anything in regards to helping me financially. And really what happened is they said, the only thing that you have then is to do domestic violence. And I found an attorney that was able to file a report with the courts allowing certain evidence in. See, my statute of limitations had ran out for criminal. However, he was able to file it for a civil case. So I ended up suing my abuser for the abuse. And ladies and gentlemen, my credit was demolished. I had an 800 credit score and it went down to below 6. And it's been taking a long time to recover. It's finally starting to recover now because it's been 7 years. See, people don't talk about this. When you leave this type of abusive situation, the financial implications are great. However, if you're staying for kids, if you're staying because you're scared of finances, it is so much better to leave and to actually make it on your own, use cash for a while, than to stay in that abusive situation, risking your life. And it's all about what you do in response to those situations. So for me, I actually sued him and used part of that settlement money to start Unsilenced Voices, to start my speaking career, to actually move forward, because it's all about how we react, not about the situation themselves.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I wondered what the transition was. Okay, so once you got out of that relationship, and that was how long ago, did you say?
So I left in 2015.
Okay. And so you went directly into creating this nonprofit,
So
right?
from
And tell me a little bit
2015,
about that.
I actually went into writing the play. The play was 2016. The nonprofit was 2017.
So, okay, I never knew about the play either. This is awesome. So the play became like your vocation, your job for about a year or two, and then you went
So
into creating the nonprofit. Yep.
yeah, so kind of what happened is I moved back to Hollywood and I still loved acting. And a friend of mine encouraged me to go see this director. Her name is Jessica Lynn Johnson. She's a great friend of mine. And I literally sat in the front row with my arms crossed and my feet up. At this time, I had torn my ACL, so I was in a full leg cast anyway. And I have always been skeptical at first for things in my life. So I was extremely skeptical back then. So I sat there and I was like, why am I here? What am I doing here? But then I started listening to her, and she was encouraging people to turn their stories into one-person shows. So I then started to write, and she started to help me edit and write, and she directed this play for me, and I performed this in 2016 at the Whitefire Solo Fest. And I remember being so scared that I actually hired 2 security guards to be there to protect myself and to protect my audience, just in case Paul showed up. So when I performed this
I would
play,
imagine.
yeah, so it was like 65 minutes of me on stage beating myself up. It was our story of what happened to me. 80% accurate. I mean, there is a 20% portion in there that is more theatrical. However, it really does depict what went on in our relationship. And then I performed that again at the Hollywood Fringe Festival in 2016. So it was an amazing feat for a performer, as you know, Carey, being in acting, memorizing 65 minutes of dialogue and performing 13 plus characters on stage. It was pretty awesome, but really it took up a year of my life. The rehearsals, the struggle, the memorization, the blocking, all of this, it took up a lot of my life. And I was bartending during that time, because that's what you do in Hollywood when you're pursuing an entertainment industry. You're bartending and serving. So that's what I was doing in the meantime.
Wow. Okay. So tell us a little bit about how you launched your nonprofit.
Yeah. So I thought I was going to be working for a nonprofit. So I actually started volunteering with nonprofits when I was in my church in 2015, late 2015. I met this man who had a nonprofit in Sierra Leone. And I said, hey, I want to help. So I started helping, and we actually took a trip to Sierra Leone in 2016. And while I was there, I was able to speak to a couple different groups of women about domestic violence in their country. And I learned horrific statistics. I talked to college-age girls, I talked to elderly women, and it was happening so often that it was just mind-blowing to me. So when I came back to the United States, I then started volunteering at the Downtown Women's Center on Skid Row in Los Angeles. And I actually applied to work there. Thing is I'm very outspoken. So when I was told to, refer these women to case managers, I actually instead gave them the advice that they were asking for, because they asked me. They knew I was a survivor. So I gave them advice. So that inhibited me from actually getting employment, but I did volunteer there for about 6 months. Great organization. Still love the Downtown Women's Center. I want to definitely use their programming and replicate that for the Tampa facility that we're hoping to build here pretty soon. And then from there, I started interviewing for other nonprofits and flew up to Oakland to interview for a nonprofit called Art and Abolition that worked in Kenya. And I felt God's presence within the organization, but didn't feel like I was supposed to be there. So then I walk around the streets of San Francisco and I have a glass of wine and my clam chowder. This was pre-COVID, so it was a lot safer. And I met this man who said, hey, I think you need to start a nonprofit, after we spoke for about 5 minutes. And I said, well, now's the time I should listen. And for those of you out there, if you're hearing something, hey, maybe you should try this, or you feel a calling from God, say yes. So I finally said yes. And he started opening doors. I met a Ghanaian doctor in Los Angeles. I had no idea what I was doing. And he said, hey, go to my country and see if you can do anything. So I did. I packed my bags and flew to Ghana. Never been to Ghana before. And just started working with different organizations there, different people. And then I already had connections in Sierra Leone. So then went there and we started what's called Matilda's program, which is our Sponsor a Survivor program. And you can find that info at sponsorasurvivor.org. And that program, helps with vocational training, materials, medical, education, monthly stipends, and counseling. So it's really amazing. And then from there, Rwanda contacted me in 2020. So we expanded there. And then in the US in 2022, we did a 4-city tour in the United States, and we were able to gift the $33,000 to multiple survivors around the country that they were able to use for transportation, relocation, housing, and childcare needs. So there's been a lot, but there's a lot more that needs to be done.
Well, I know because I follow you, obviously, and sometimes our paths cross, which is super cool.
Yeah.
That you are just really on a mission, and this is just really blowing up in a very good way. And unfortunately, it's such a need in our world. And I don't know if it's just because of the fact that we can see so much more now than we used to be able to see with social media and people starting to be more transparent about their backgrounds. But it seems like the statistics are climbing like it is with suicide. Obviously, I follow that very closely because of my background. Do you think that's true, that it's climbing, or does it feel like or do you think it's just because we have so much more access to being aware of it?
So I think it's both. So the reason why I think it's both is because we do have access, right? So it's easier for people to be manipulated through social media, through AI technology. It's easier for us as people in society to see some of this online. However, there's 8 billion people on this planet now. It is 2023, okay? So the date today is September 2023, right? So there's 8 billion people. They're actually expecting that people are going to double in the next 5 to 10 years. That's not including all the AI technology that's coming out, right? We have a technological revolution happening. Traffickers and abusers are using these types of technology to then be the perpetrators and abuse a lot of these victims. So yes, it is climbing. And a lot of it is because we as a society have made this almost okay in a sense. Because in my opinion, I feel like we as society, not just the government, but us as a society can do even more. And we don't, right? So Lee Steinberg is a friend of mine. Lee Steinberg is Patrick Mahomes' agent from the Kansas City Chiefs. And Lee has supported us in multiple fundraising events. And there was this one event in particular, late 2022, and he was speaking from stage and he said, it is not about them. Is it about us that can make a difference? Not about them, right? So we always say them, the government, them, they're going to do something. It's about us. So it's about us speaking up. It's about us telling our stories. It's about us bringing even more awareness so that us can change it, not that so that them can change it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's so true because I think so many times we look to, like you said, all the outside entities to fix it. And we're in a world right now, especially with our young adults, that I really want to focus on right now, Michelle, as you know, teaching them that their leadership is so needed so badly right now. Because it is going to be from a, grassroots kind of thing to change a trajectory or an epidemic. So I just applaud you for what you are doing for people who have been in your situation, being so transparent about your story. And I just want to tell you that I'm a big fan of yours, and I just really want to support you. And I want to encourage all the listeners to support you too. So how can they find you and how can they do that?
Thank you, Carey. And you are right. It is about the younger generation. So if you are out there listening to this, it is about you. So take that next step because you are a leader and you are the only people that can change what is happening in our world today. You can find me at michellejewsbury.com. So MicheleJewsbury.com. You can also find more information at Unsilenced Voices So yes, please reach out. We definitely need help in all sorts of ways. And if you are searching for a platform or anything to be able to tell your story, we offer those speaking platforms. We offer book collaborations so that you can get your story out there, because the more of us that speak up, the more change that can happen.
So true. Well, I again thank you for your time, my friend. I hope that this reaches many, many people and helps them change their lives as well. And I want to thank all the listeners for listening to this episode, subscribing to this channel, and to just remember to keep looking up. If you found this episode inspiring or helpful, please share it with a friend or a family member. In order to be successful on this mission, I can't do it alone. Connect with me at www.careyconley.com, and don't forget to sign up for my weekly Do It On Purpose newsletter. Let's build this life-giving vision movement together to end this epidemic, save lives, and create purpose.